y'all, welcome back to another tutorial. Thank you for watching. So for today's video, I'm going to be showing y'all how to create the pattern for this structured corset. Now this is a part of a two-piece gown that I'm designing, so this is the full look that I'm creating. But for this video, I'm just going to be focusing on showing y'all how I go about creating this pattern. So with that being said, let's get into it. All right, y'all, so we are going to start by padding our mannequin. This is very similar to how we did in my last tutorial. So since I am not adding too much to this mannequin, I'm really just trying to get the shape that I want for that hip extension. I'm not going to start by wrapping it with batting. Like I mentioned in my last video, we're going to just wrap it first with the plastic wrap and then start adding our stuffing. When doing this, you want to decide how much farther you want the corset to extend from the hip. So once you get that number, I think I went with like about 2 to 3 inches. Once you get that number, you'll use that or keep that in mind as you pad this mannequin, because you want to make sure it's about 3 inches bigger on both sides. Now, you don't have to you don't have to wrap both sides of the mannequin or pad both sides of the mannequin. Since I typically like to do my patterns on half of the mannequin, I'm only going to pad and wrap half of the mannequin. This will be useful later because when I start to measure the mannequin, I will be able to reference the size of the hip on one side and compare it to the other side to make sure it's a few inches bigger or it's the correct size that I need it to be. But as you can see, padding this is super simple. I'm just wrapping the plastic wrap around, I'm molding, I'm shaping, and as I wrap around, I'm adding more and more stuffing to the mannequin. I realized that I was only padding the back hip, so I needed to add some more padding towards the front. So I'm checking the size now. That's what I mean by comparing one side to the other. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some more padding to it. Another thing that's super important when doing this is you want to make sure that you don't get too much of the padding at the waist, especially if your mannequin is already the correct waist size. That's going to end up making it a little too big. So make sure you try and keep the padding starting a little lower, but beneath the waist. I ended up making that mistake when I did mine and ended up having to do alterations later. And once you're done padding your mannequin, you want to go ahead and just check the size one more time. And if it's good, then you could go into the next step. So now we are going to use Pellon, Ultra Stiff Pellon. I believe I have the fusible kind. And we're going to use that to create this 3D shape at the top of our corset. Since I wanted to have structure and support, of course, we're going to be using boning and things like that. But this is really helpful for creating the pattern. And we're even going to add a little bit of this into the corset itself. So, yes, we're starting off with that. And as you can see, I pinned it starting from the center front. And I drew the outline of what I want the shape to be, and now I am just cutting it out. Now, once you are happy with your shape, we are going to cut a little bit of ease into our Pelon. I wanted to lay a specific way. Now, for this specific look, I don't want it to mold perfectly to the breast. I actually wanted to have this straight look to it. I'm not sure if you can see from the side. There we go. But that's the look I wanted to have. So we're only cutting some ease into the bottom of the Pelon and then onto the side a little bit. So now that that's done, we can go ahead and create the outline of our bodice. This is basically me using draping ribbon. Some people use draping tape. This is called soutache. I don't know how to spell it, but this is what my mentor taught me to use. And I'm using this soutache to basically create all the seam lines for this corset. So we are going to have 3 pattern pieces at the front and 2 at the back. So 5 pieces total. 5 pattern pieces total. And I am going to mark each seam. So I used a little bit more Pelon because I want, as you can see, I want this to kind of stick out on the sides as well. And so I'm adding a little bit more Pelon because I don't want it to be super flat on the sides. And so what I'll do is I'll take that draping ribbon and have it actually go on top of the Pelon instead of underneath, of course. And then we're going to continue that shape of our corset down onto that second piece of Pelon. Now, if you would like yours to be more fitted to the body, go ahead and do that, of course. This is just how I specifically wanted this design. I wanted to look like volume at the top and volume at the bottom. And then whatever extra Pelon that's there that's kind of in the way, you could just go ahead and cut off. It's not going to be necessary. And so I actually cut off my Pelon at the front where it meets with the other piece, and then we could cut off the extra Pelon at the top edge as well. So now that that's done, we can move forward with adding the rest of our seam lines. This part is pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. One thing I do always recommend though for this part is use the silver pins when you are doing it. And yeah, that's about it for this part. And yeah, if you're good with your shape of your corset and you are happy with how everything looks, then yeah, we could add the rest of your seam lines, and then we will start draping our pattern. I just realized I forgot to mention the other thing that you are going to do as well is do the top and bottom seam lines as well, basically the top edge and the bottom edge of your corset. And so when we cut our Pelon, you should actually cut it a little bit larger than the actual shape you want the top of the corset to be. That way you can add your seam lines there. But once those two lines are added, then we could go ahead and start to drape this pattern. So doing the center front and side front pieces are actually going to be pretty easy since we don't have to focus on a fully curved bust and we're draping over this Pelon. So essentially we're draping a rectangle with a little bit of shape. So as you can see, I'm pinning up enough of the fabric to be able to cover the base of the pattern, and then I'm just cutting off what's remaining. The most important part though, and something we're going to do for all of these pieces to make sure we have ease in our pattern and the fit is correct, we are going to be doing some clipping or some cutting and spreading. It's basically when you cut into the pattern to get a better fit. Hey designers, I know you're enjoying this video, but I wanted to take a moment to talk to you. So I have been doing couture draping for the past 6 years now, and I've literally been able to see my skill grow tremendously over the past few years. And because of that, it's opened so many doors for me. I've been able to grow my clientele. I've been able to get opportunities to have my gowns featured on red carpets and many more things. Even I ended up on Tamron Hall at one point, actually 3 times. But I say that to say, I'm so grateful that I have documented this entire process. I've documented my entire journey on how I've learned these different techniques, how I've grown my skills, and I've packaged it all up and put it into a course. This course has different things like full-length tutorials, technique breakdowns, and I just added a new feature to this course where I do monthly updates. So each month you get a new project. So now I want to take a moment to invite you to sign up for this course. If you know that you are ready to take your skills to the next level, then this is something that you should look into. I've had students who have literally came and joined my classes, joined my courses, and in a matter of weeks, they've been able to create garments that look like this. So if you know that this is something that you are interested in and ready to do, go ahead and click the link in the description and sign up for my course, and I can't wait to see what you create. Now, let's get back to the video. So I'll be able to explain better as we go through this tutorial, and you'll see more of what I mean. But as we create each pattern, we'll repeat the same steps of one, creating the outline of the shape, following our seam lines that we created with our draping tape. Then you are going to mark your waist. At the front, we're marking the center fold, and then we're always going to mark our seam allowance. And of course, anywhere there's a fold, you don't have to put seam allowance. But this is what our first pattern piece looks like. And now we're going to do the same thing for this next piece. So this time I need to make sure that the fabric is wide enough to cover our 3D structured piece that we have going on on the side. And so I'm just pinning enough of this to make sure there's coverage. But then I'm going to remove the excess because trying to drape this with all that fabric would just honestly make it too heavy, and I wouldn't be able to properly get that shape. And I always like to make sure whenever I'm cutting excess fabric, I give myself a couple of inches of room all around the pattern, just because you never know if you need to shift anything or move anything. You want to give yourself that extra space. But now we're going back into the slashing and spreading. Now, whenever you do this, you want to make sure that you cut to the seam line but not through it. Imagine that your pattern is what it actually is inside of the seam line. So if you cut through it, now you're cutting through your pattern. So imagine anything outside of the seam lines is your seam allowance. And so if you keep that in mind while you're doing this, then you should be able to create all of your pattern pieces correctly. Now we're going to continue this process through the rest of these pieces, and the rest are honestly pretty easy. We have our piece on the side, our hip. This is like the most curved piece. When draping over curved pieces, you typically have to do more slashing and spreading just to get it to fit properly. So keep that in mind around the curves. On straighter pieces, you typically don't have to do much slashing and spreading at all. So our back piece, like our center back piece, is probably going to use little to no slashing and spreading since the back is, pretty flat. There's not a lot of curve. But yes, for this part, as you can see, I'm marking the number, I'm marking the seam allowance, and I'm marking the waist. Oh, and another thing that you can also mark that I typically do, but I didn't do it on this one because the type of corset it is. You also can mark the upper bust, center bust, and under bust as well. That's something that is also really helpful, especially when it comes to having to do pattern alterations or different things like that for your clients. Whenever you are working with clients who aren't the exact same size as your dress form, you want to be able to keep those markings there. That way you can grade up or grade down, however it is needed. But we are wrapping up with creating the first part of our pattern. I just have a few more things to do to this, and then we're going to move to the next step. So we are on to the last piece. Also, let me know in the comments if this is too sped up for y'all. If y'all would like to see this process a little slower, let me know. That way I can include that in my videos. But once you are done making your pattern, you want to go ahead and cut off all the extra fabric, of course, keeping your seam allowance. If you need to do pattern alterations, you would do that before cutting everything out. And then you want to go ahead and test your pattern. So you're going to sew everything together. This part is crucial to make sure it fits right. So you should have something that looks like this. Now it will lay flatter once we cut that ease and that tension into the pattern. And this is how that top part of my corset is going to look, but we're not focusing on sewing that for this tutorial. We're only focused on the body of the corset, but this is what we have so far. So now we are on to the final part of our pattern, which is really just creating that bottom shape. I want this look to be asymmetrical, so I am going to just draw those lines and cut. If you like to add a little padding just underneath the corset to be able to get a better visual of how that side will lay before you start creating that bottom shape, then you can. But there's no specific rule or method to this. It's honestly just based on your visual preference, like how you would like it to look. I want mine to be slightly, I wouldn't call it dramatic, but I want my angle to be very visible. But once you're done, you want to go ahead and cut your seam allowance. I would say add extra space though, just in case you want your corset to be longer than what you created it to be. So I would say even cut about an extra inch of space for this part, and if you like it shorter, that's something that you could do later. But that concludes our tutorial. This is how the corset ended up turning out. If you would like to learn how to make this entire corset from beginning to end, go ahead and check out my course. The link is in the description, and I'll see y'all next week. Bye y'all.